Hello and welcome back to the Maritime Forecast, which is a podcast brought to you by Develop Consulting in conjunction with our partners, the Society of Maritime Industries. This is where we explore the sort of trends and the challenges and the opportunities that are really shaping the future of the UK maritime shipbuilding industry. Now, my name is Darren Jones. I'm the Maritime Director at Develop Consulting, where we specialise in operational improvement, particularly for low volume, high value manufacturers, and that's across all sectors: rail, aerospace, automotive, and of course maritime. Now today we've got a shorter episode, a little bit different, because we really want to talk about the Defence Investment Plan, which was issued only a few days ago. In order to do that, I've got a man that's probably actually read it. Oh yes, we're absolutely delighted to say I'm joined by Mark Albon, who is the Director of Maritime Defence and Security Group at the Society of Maritime Industries. Mark, anything you want to say about yourself? And then we'll get straight into talking about the DIP, as it's called.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be delighted to talk about the DIP. Just a quick one, I suppose. The Society of Maritime Industries, for those who don't know, represents maritime engineering, science, technology sector. And that includes the whole of the maritime enterprise, shipbuilding, ship repair, systems, equipment, ports, maritime and science, autonomy, digital, and defence. So my specific role in that is to connect industry with government, and the people I talk to are the Ministry of Defence. Hence, I'm talking to you today about the DIP, particularly the naval staff and the Royal Navy, based down in NCHQ in Portsmouth, and the wider defence enterprise. And basically, it's a simple job of making sure the voice of maritime supply chains heard, and not just the voice of the large primes. Although we do represent the primes as well.
Oh, thanks for that, Mark. That's a great insight to where you're at and what we're doing. So the DIP was issued at long last a few days ago. There's been all sorts of headlines on the news about it. I'm sure everybody's seen. But what do you, from the Society of Maritime Industries, think this really means to your membership? What would the main takeaways of it be?
I think probably the first thing, and actually it's really good that you talk about sort of, I suppose, the politics of the last few weeks, where we've heard, the Treasury's doing X and the number is this and maybe it's that and we've got to do something different, all that. I think most people in the industry and the MOD as well both understand that defence and security, the relevance, if you like, is increasing. The geopolitical situation is getting more complicated, and we need to try and address that concern. And the DIP is that sort of first building block to do that. And I would say that first point is, whatever you think about the numbers on the DIP, it's a serious demand signal. It commits 298 billion over 4 years, and that's an additional 15 billion. And these are big numbers, above previous settlements. So, and this matters because industry has been asking for a clearer view of, where we are, what's defence doing, what's its thought, and let's just bear in mind, the SDR was published well over a year ago, and it was, it was supposed to happen rapidly and quickly, and for all those politics that's happened, sort of, in government, it's made it difficult to come out. At last, there's been almost a sigh of relief that we're back to, we are there, ready, and we're ready for the next stage. So the first bit, I suppose, really, main takeaway, yes, it's a demand signal. It's welcomed, and I use that cautiously because I'll be honest, industry, they're not surprised by what's in it. We've had lots of conversations about, what we think's in it, particularly on a maritime area, and therefore it's no surprise. And so it's almost just been landed. Yeah, great, that's fine. The next question straight away is, how are we going to deliver it? And that's already where the conversation's gone. It's almost like, yeah, I've got that. Yeah, I can see where the money is. Right, how are we going to deliver what it is you want? And
so the big takeaway is clearly then, we got a report that we pretty much expected. It said what it said. Okay. There was a bit of a differential on the numbers. So it's the how do we do it then? How do we do it? And that brings us to a massive topic of conversation at this year's SMI conference up in Glasgow. Was it was all about sovereign capability and capacity. And does that either address this, or does that make this more challenging, or that more challenging?
I would say it starts to address it. We've got some there's some pretty gnarly problems that we haven't solved, and the dip's not the place to solve it. I think if you listen to some of the rhetoric that's out by politicians at the moment, and I've heard even Andy Burnham, and he's probably going to be the next prime minister, and he's spoken about, I'm going to be ensure that we buy British, and we've got to be better at getting British jobs and all that stuff, which is all it's all good words, and it's things that the industry want to hear. Absolutely fine, but you then got to deal with the Treasury. You've then got to deal with various trade arrangements we have, and I'll use one in particular, just to give you an example. So Type 26 off to Norway, great fanfare, 10 billion, that's really good for the UK, isn't it? Yes, it is, for the supply chain, and it's over 10 years to deliver it. But the flip side of that is Norway have an offset where we need to now let them effectively come back into use that money that's offset against 100% of that 10 billion. So over 10 years. So hang on. So there are certain things that we're talking about, everything buying British. Actually, well, actually, we've got to have to give some stuff up to Norway, and that's what you do on these trade arrangements. So we've got to be a bit careful on when we say, oh yeah, we're definitely going to buy British. Well, we've got to understand what UK sovereignty is, or rather, what is sovereign capability. And there's a slight difference between what's UK content and what sovereign capability is. And the sovereign capability is what is it that is so unique to the UK, say, and what is it that we really want to protect? And when the balloon goes up, what's the most important bit that we need to be able to scale up quickly? So that's the bit we're not there yet, because we haven't actually agreed what sovereign capabilities we need in the UK. And we haven't actually understood exactly what UK content is either.
Yeah.
And I'll give you some more examples. So you could contract with the UK prime, and that would be 100% UK. Actually, no, because in their supply chain, it could be 80% overseas. But that's ticked off at the moment as that's a UK build, but it isn't, because there's lots of overseas components in there. So how do you score that? Now, and we're not very clear yet on how that works. But the good news is there's a body called the Defence Industry Joint Council. They're wrestling with, what does sovereign capability look like? Well, what is it? Let's get an agreed term, and we need to use that to frame how we move forward with the money in the dip. So those two things really ought to go in hand. The dip doesn't solve it. It sort of puts a nod towards it, and it says the right things, but we need to do a bit more work now together to understand exactly what does that mean, and then we can be at a better pace about what is sovereign capability, and what is it we're going to try and protect and scale up in the future.
So Mark, the dip, sovereign capability and capacity. We've talked a little bit about that capability bit, but there's also a link to capacity, the number of shipyards we've got. Can we do it? Yeah. Does the dip help?
It does in one respect, but first of all, it's probably worth saying on the capacity issue, most people have a thought, if you like, that there's not enough UK shipbuilding capacity in the UK. But if you're talking about space, dry docks, wharfage, and that sort of thing, then actually we do. And there's an OECD report which was commissioned by the National Shipbuilding Office, which shows you, as you look at a throughput of all our defence programmes and our government programmes, so CFAS, Trinity House, Border Force, wrapping up everything that the government's doing, we only ever get to around 41% of using the available capacity, which will come as a complete shock to most people. But that's not the whole story, because actually, to get a shipyard up and running, obviously you need a skilled workforce. And so those skilled workforces don't just sit there waiting to turn the tap on and away you go. And therefore we can use 100% of the real estate. No, absolutely not. It takes years. I think about the investment that Navantia put in recently into Harland and Wolff. It's just shy of about £100 million, and most of that is on. Yes, there's some real estate, and there's doing some stuff for the hangarage, if you like, and the inside workshops. But actually, a lot of it is on the apprenticeship program, and because they're looking ahead to try and build up enough apprentices so they can meet the demands of the future solid support, the fleet solid support ship. So. And that goes the same for any shipyard. So BAE Systems is no different. So again, it comes back to that. What's important about this dip is it gives clarity. Here are some programs, and it means that industry can now start to actually make some plans against those and get the right people in the right place. So when we talk about capacity, we have to be clear that it's a mixture, if you like, of the skills, the apprentices, the people you need, as well as the real estate and the actual hard yardage that you've got. Now, why does a dip help? Well, one, it's good to know that the nuclear enterprise got all that money and Dreadnought, and we've got submarines down the line. 12. Actually, interestingly for me, from a maritime perspective, was that one of the big takeaways was that we cited the F-35 Alpha. Now, it's not maritime, but it's in there in part of that sort of nuclear bucket of money. So that 63 billion isn't just submarines, it's the nuclear enterprise, which includes the F-35 Alpha as well. But the other big one, the hybrid navy, I think is going to help that capacity issue. Why? Because if we move from just feast or famine complex warships, yes, we've got the Type 26 and Type 31 sort of coming online, and that's going to be sort of the bedrock, if you like, for the next decade or so. But if we go down that hybrid navy, that's a lot of smaller yards, medium scale yards, disaggregated work. It means we can open up a lot more work and share it around the ecosystem. We've also got the likes of the, and I'm probably going to get the term wrong, is the CCV, the Common Combat Vessel. That's right, which is effectively the, some people would look at it and say, well, that's the replacement for Type 45, isn't it? But it isn't. It's a combat. It's a common combat vessel. The common is that you can use it for a whole load of different things, whether it's controlling underwater sensors, whether it's controlling manned, not manned, sorry, platforms, uncrewed platforms, delivering payloads, or whether it's maybe, which is part of the actual design, is to have an uncrewed sort of air defense sensor, and that's going to be all part of that common architecture.
Yeah.
But that's quite exciting, because that's to me, I think that sounds quite complex, isn't it? That sounds like a big ship to me. So there's enough work for the big yards, but then we've got all that autonomy and those uncrewed vessels. That's going to spread out a lot more work for other smaller yards, and therefore we get a different supply chain. And if part of the dip is what we're trying to do is get forward to, and this is where we talk about the sort of the UK content sovereign capability argument. What that's all about is about resilience, and that's about developing an industrial base for the future. So I think. Does it answer the question? No, it doesn't, because not all the answers are there, but it moves us in the right direction, and I think it's a different approach that we're taking. So I think that's quite positive. But like all these
have
things,
you had
Darren,
much feedback from members on the dip?
Yeah, I have.
I mean, positive
yeah, most of them would say. Positive is quite a strong emotion. I would say. They've been cautiously optimistic, and I think we may have said before that there wasn't an awful lot in the dip that surprised them. Enough, I think, had been out in the press and leaked out about this program, that amount of money, this amount of money. We've talked about the hybrid navy for a long time, and if I think back to, I think Sir Gwyn Jenkins, the first Sea Lord, first mentioned it in open forum back in 25 at DSEI, in September DSEI, and said, this is what we're going to do. And and the words he used were, we're going to be at warfighting readiness within 4 years. And that tells you that warfighting readiness in 4 years, my God, if you think about the procurement journey that the MOD normally, that journey you'll normally take, that's pace. That's going fast. And he is driving it to go fast. So I think industry likes Gwyn, and they like his ambition, and they like the way he's been quite direct and pushing this and pushing the hybrid navy and getting us into the right place. So that's positive. But the caution is always that the current procurement rules, the frameworks that we use, they're built for peacetime. And we're sort of in that hybrid warfare stage now. We are being attacked. We are under attack, and we need to go faster. And the system, as it is at the moment, is not designed to go fast. It's designed to look after taxpayers' money, go down the tender route, make sure everything's, transparent. And so it's not really, we want to go fast, but the system doesn't let us. So that's where the caution comes from, because, it's great words. Everyone talks about going at pace, but until we start seeing some contracts start to fly out the door, that's when the investor confidence will start to
demand signal is lovely, but orders is what makes business move.
Exactly.
And having that continuity of orders, that's what we really need to be seeing.
Absolutely.
And we particularly need it because the skills shortage. There is a skills shortage. We've got to upskill. And the other thing to take from the dip is it's not just maritime. You've got the Army and the Air Force, and guess what? They're going to be taking the same sort of skills, and they're going to be taking the people. So, places like Plymouth that have got a really mixed defence industry around there. Maritime's, in the queue. So I see that as a real challenge as well. We need to wrap up.
Yeah,
sure. I was going to just say, I've got one last question. You walk around Whitehall sometimes.
I think I know where this is going.
Is a new, probably Andy Burnham administration going to stick with the dip, or is it going to be changed? What's the word on the street?
I think so. One of the things we do is a lot of advocacy, and I trust me, this isn't a politician's answer. I'm not ducking the question. I will tell you honestly, but I just want to say one of the things that we absolutely push is, do not change the dip. We've waited a year to get here. We've got some clarity. We've got a demand signal. We need to get on with it. Now, if you're going to come into and find some more money, great. If you're going to come in and add to the dip, great. If you're going to come and change procurement rules to make it faster, great. If you're going to come in and say, we need to do a review and delay, it's all over. So that's where we are in industry, and that's the message that we push. Now, the good thing, I think, and I'm just like you, I haven't heard through Whitehall, because Andy Burnham's keeping himself quite at arm's length from Whitehall at the moment, quite rightly, because he's not there yet. But if you take him at his word in what he's saying in the press, he's saying he wants to build in Britain more. And the other thing I heard him say, that he wants to find the money for defence. I'm not quite sure what that means. Find the money. Is that the amount of money he thinks that should be in there, or the amount that the armed forces thinks? I don't know, but it does sound like he things. Whether that changes when he walks across the number 10, I honestly don't know.
Well, Mark, I think you summed it up, and we'll probably send a snippet of you saying what they should and shouldn't do straight to Andy Burnham. See if that hits home. Mark, you've been a great guest. I know there's loads more questions we could do, but we're just limited on time on this one. I hope you'll join us for another podcast later in the year. You've been absolutely great. Thank you for listening or viewing the Maritime Forecast, this podcast that's brought to you by Develop Consulting with our partners, the Society of Maritime Industries. For those that don't know, Develop Consulting work on operational excellence in lots of low volume, high value manufacturers, from rail industry, aerospace, automotive, and of course, maritime. And the SMI, well, they are the eyes, ears, and voice of the maritime industry in the UK, and around the world for us with over 400 members. And if you're not a member and you're in the maritime industry, you should be. So if you are involved in shipbuilding, vessel refit, manufacturing, and do want to discuss operational excellence, what that really looks like in the maritime world, please, you can contact me at darren.jones@develop-consulting.co.uk. Drop me a line and we'll see how we can talk about getting excellence, true global excellence, into your operation. We'll be back soon for another Maritime Forecast. Until then, thanks for listening.